Nariman, Bakri, Karim, Essa, and Nusrat Durrani are part of a MTV project called Rebel Music. It was Nusrat's idea to take music beyond entertainment into zones of connectivity, to bring protest voices, to bring youth across many continents and many countries together, and to find a universal language through music in search of justice and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nariman, Bakri, Karim, Essa, and Nusrat Durrani.
One of the supporters from Mohamed Morsi. The reason why I'm supporting him because I see in him a better future for Egypt. He will give us the first step to learn what is democracy. And now you are trying to force him to move down, step down. That's not democracy. That's not the freedom I want.
What you see right here is the graffiti as a memorial for everybody who fell, all the martyrs between the fall of Mubarak and right now. They tried to remove this memorial when Morsi first became a president, but the graffiti artists came back and drew more. The memorials are all the way to Tahrir Square. And as you can see, most of the faces are smiling, but they got bullet holes in their heads.
Music definitely has a very strong role to play in voicing the average Egyptian's thoughts. These musicians really capture the thoughts of the average Egyptian, what frustrates them in life, the struggles that they go through on a day-to-day basis. So it's clear that we don't need a physical revolution of, protests, clashes, bloodshed. We need a mental revolution. There has to be a thought revolution.
Tick-tock, 8 o'clock, they ain't at the spot. Po-po just passed me the...
This is the lab, we call it, or the spaceship, because people come here and their vocals leave to the rest of the world. It's a very small room, but here's the mic, here's a computer, and of course the knowledge. What I'm working on now is basically Makshufin 3, or Exposed Part 3, which is the third song that exposes the Muslim Brotherhood. So the most important thing is it has to come out before June 30th, because that's when the second revolution starts.
كل حاجة غلتوها إلا تمن الدم المصري، كل فعل منكم دين حتردوا للشعب المصري، مصر تاني تثور على طيور الظلام، الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام.
ارجع لما تكون شغال بذمة خايف على مصلحة الأمة شغلك يطلع من غير لازمة علشان.
So far we have over 22 million votes for the rebel campaign to overthrow the current government.
We should go to the streets and make a list of proper and rational demands rather than say, oh, the president, I don't like him, let's just get rid of him.
I think it's bigger than that. I think this is the scary part. This ideology that they're trying to enforce onto people.
So just because you disagree with their ideology, you want to overthrow them?
So you have to break down the foundation to start over.
People will actually get what they want if they do it through legal measures.
The two main elements at play here is evolving versus adapting. And to sit there and bide our time and hope for something better, that's just adapting. And what we need to do is evolve.
لقد بذلت القوات المسلحة خلال الأشهر الماضية جهودا مضنية لا
يقصي establish unity and stability without excluding anybody from society. We're going to have to stop making new laws for the parliament. You're going to carry out new laws that will force all the institutions to add youth into them. Our generation will be in charge. That means he's gone. Get my back, it's a celebration, Mabruk!
This is amazing!
twice, 2 presidents in 3 years, man.
كل حاجة غلتوها إلا تمن الدم المصري، كل فعل منكم دين هتردوا للدعم المصري. مصر تعين الثور على طيور الظلام، الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام.
We are against radical Islam here, and we're not going to allow it. We did not allow it, and you should not allow it either. I'm pro the army now. I wasn't pro the army before.
احنا وفي الركعة الثانية في صلاة الفجر كده عند الركوع بدأت الناس تخبط على العواميد، معناها ان في حاجة خطر.
ففوجئنا ان الجيش كمان بيضرب.
The square was being shot at continuously for 9 hours, and then they went in and just took everyone out.
This is not acceptable. This is not human. Everyone has a right to have a peaceful demonstration. This is not democracy. I have lost every faith in democracy.
I actually fear that Egypt is becoming a country that I, as a person, would not want to live in.
I hope that the future's going to go fine. We've been through a lot of bloodshed in the past 3 to 4 years, and we deserve a good ending. We deserve a happy ending after all of this, so we hope for one.
There you have it, the energy, the passion, the complexity. And we're going to probe some of that. You know, Karim is a rapper from Egypt, and Nariman is a music curator working with the Cairo Jazz Club. And as I said, Nusrat is with MTV, and he conceived this project. So before I come to the two of you, Nusrat, how did this idea arise? And you know, very quickly, what are the countries that you've mapped? And what are the kind of strands that emerged through this project?
Well, you know, I manage a division of the company called MTV World. And, you know, what we do is we bring stories about youth and music and trends and, you know, developments around the youth audience in the rest of the world back to America. So obviously, in the course of our research in the past 2-3 years, what we found is that the mainstream narrative about many of the countries in turmoil is a little bit one-dimensional. You know, and in my travels and in the work we do and the research we do, we found that the world could probably benefit with a better, more you know, nuanced understanding of what really is happening in some of these countries. And what we found also is that there were some common threads, and one of them was youth. You know, so to give you an example, you know, the 6 countries we're covering, it's a 6-part documentary series, and the 6 countries we're covering in the first season are Egypt, Afghanistan, Israel, Palestine, Mexico, and Mali. And of course, we're focused on Egypt in this particular session, but there is a thread that runs through all of them. And in Egypt, what we found is very interesting that, you know, particularly in the Western world, I think we know Egypt and what's happened there in the past 2-3 years through its headlines. You know, sound bites that are very smart and, you know, impactful, but don't necessarily create the full sort of picture of what really is happening. Who are these people? What are they fighting for? And, you know, what I found very striking is that most of the stories about Egypt are actually delivered by either newscasters or, you know, politically motivated people. And, you know, the stories coming out from them are usually skewed, or if not even if they're skewed, they do not focus on the main constituencies.
So what's the energy that you tapped into? You know, what is the kind of new voice that you found through this project?
What we found is that, you know, if the world knew about what the youth in these countries is talking about, what their motivations are, and what they're doing and what they're feeling, you know, would be very useful to understand. So we went to Egypt, and, you know, we were shooting there during the Second Revolution in June. And, you know, frankly, even for me, you know, I thought that, you know, all of the protesters are going to be politically motivated people or Morsi supporters, usually, you know, older people with vested interests. But I was shocked to see really what's happening. That we had housewives with babies on the streets. We had, you know, musicians very actively engaged, very passionate and really driving the change. We had, you know, someone like Nariman who works in the music industry, but is not necessarily, you know, she's not a political person. We had businessmen and cab drivers on the streets. And I found that this is a very empowered citizenry that is really, really, voting with their feet, if you will. And I don't think the world knows that. And that was very, very inspiring for me personally because, I live in America, but we had 2 weeks ago a government shutdown there. I didn't see anyone on the streets protesting. So, that's the story we wanted to bring, and I felt like the humanity of this is something that the world needs to know.
So Nariman, all this energy that we saw on screen, what one does know because of the images that came across during the, the Cairo, the first gathering in Cairo, was that art, graffiti, music, sheer creativity of that Tahrir Square gathering was there for the world to see. But in terms of music, and when you were at the Cairo club, the jazz club, is there kind of class divide to this music? Is it the upper class kids that are part of the music scene in Egypt, or is it really like ground up?
First of all, what we do is basically we try to unearth any up-and-coming talent, regardless of the class, it makes no difference. But is it happening down on ground, or is that luxury only for the upper classes? No, I think it's happening on a massive scale. People from all walks of life are expressing themselves, and I think it comes hand in hand with revolutions, because when you talk about a revolution, you're talking about people coming together to express themselves, and expression is where art stems from. And so basically, then from that context, it doesn't make a difference. People are able to then connect with one another. It bridges the gaps, and I come from a very niche segment I represent a very niche segment of the population. It's not the majority of Egypt. But then we're able to relate to one another and stand in unity through that binding element, which is art.
So what is the kind of music that's coming out of Egypt at this time, and has it changed from the kind of music that was happening before the revolution? Is it all very political music? Is it underground stuff? Is it borrowing from Western models of rock, or is it very indigenous?
It's honestly a lot of the bands, a lot of musicians kind of transcend genres altogether. So not all the bands focus on political content, but definitely people are more empowered now to express themselves. So we've been seeing a lot more talents. A lot of people are putting together band formations and sending us demos and things like that, particularly after the revolution, which is it's very refreshing to see.
So did anything become a signature song during the revolution?
Rami Assam's song was definitely, it really empowered people, because it basically highlighted all the corruption, everything that's wrong, basically, and Arabian Nights as well. Their raps are very vindictive and just basically they voice what people want to say. That is what we're in the streets trying to say. We're speaking our minds, we're talking about our frustration, we're talking about what we're trying to change. And they managed to do that and put it together in a nice way that people enjoy listening to, and it's catchy.
So Karim, before I ask you about your politics, will you share some lyrics? Will you do a bit of hip-hop for us?
I usually do this on a tabla, but there's no tabla behind me, but just bear with me. عرب بتك على طبلة ودنك دمدمتك من تحت أسفلتك طلعت مزيكا تعبر لك من شعرك وشرعك من جوه أصلك يجمع لك كل حروف لغتك كلمات بتعبر عن فكرك ورشة هو الراس لو للراب العربي جسم والفرسان هم العرب لو للراب المصري اسم بالإيقاع الفنان بيركب كلام على الريتم. Thank you.
Like we had a women panel yesterday, when one of the women spoke in Manipuri, we couldn't understand the words she said, but we caught the emotion. I think we all caught the emotion. But will you tell us the words? What were you saying?
This song is not a political song. It's basically one of the songs we did to introduce hip-hop to the public in Egypt who are not used to this kind of music. So what I'm saying is, I'm explaining to them that my words are riding on the drum, which you're used to listening to, but I'm using your words, your culture, your background to do poetry about you that represents you, that speaks to you. So that's basically what I'm explaining it to them, because I'm trying to relate to them that this is something that's not far away from their background. Poetry has always been a part of our culture. That's what I'm trying to tell them. I'm giving you something that belongs to you in the first place.
So Karim, would your family accept that you're a hip-hop artist?
At first, no, but then when they saw me on TV.
Actually, his mom told me to find Karim a real job.
So does music pay in Egypt?
Shows, yeah, but sales, you know how it is now. People download.
So, Karim, share a little bit about your background. You know, what sort of a family do you come from? What is your milieu?
My dad is a principal of a school, an American Egyptian international school. He worked first in Oman, which is like across the sea from here. That's where I grew up, and that's where I actually got my hip-hop background from. And then when I moved back in Egypt, I was a teenager, and people were really shocked about the way I was dressing and what I was listening to. And I took it upon myself. I'm like, this music is actually going to help you guys. It's not like Habibi music, like we call it, the other pop music, we call it Habibi music, because every Arabic song has Habibi in it. And so we had to create something that talks about other problems. I think problems of my generation is not just, oh, she left me, she's with me, you know, we have other problems. We can't afford sometimes.
So Karim, on that little slice that we saw from the film, you started out by saying you wanted Morsi, and then, of course, very soon afterwards, people wanted him out. But that's, in fact, the complex thing that happened with the whole Cairo revolution. So how do you square with it now? You know, the fact that the army deposed him, are you all right with that?
Taking him out of position had to happen because Egypt was going downhill and it was not going to last 4 years with him. Basically, he was not going to stay for 4 years to set things up for the next government and then leave. He was planning to stay there forever. He was changing the constitution to serve him and his political party. A lot of changes happened. First of all, of course, we all wanted to give him a chance. You know, give him, you know, maybe we'll see what happens. But just like 2 months into it, the amount of stuff that happened from him that was wrong, that targeted us to move, kept on escalating and building up, and then 6 months into it, they actually attacked demonstrators violently. Militias, like armed militias, attacked the people right under the palace of Morsi, right under his eyes, and they were let go, and the cops didn't even react to it. So this is the trigger that turned everybody's head around. I was like, oh, so that's how it's gonna be? This is not what we actually revolted and, you know, oust Mubarak for. We have demands and they will be met, whether he wants to do it or not.
Nariman, I'm just going to be, you know, I'm going to come back to you to understand just the place that music has in Egyptian society. You know, we all live with stereotypes. We've been speaking to the Taliban at this event. There is a kind of fixed notion about Islam in the Middle East, so I'm going to come back to you. But Nusrat, you know, you went to all these 6 countries. What is the place that music has in, say, Israel and Palestine? Is there a kind of pool of Western protest music from which these other countries are drawing on, or is it a kind of indigenous, new sort of music that's coming up?
You know, yes and no. There is definitely, you know, a thread of sort of, you know, music throughout, first of all, and secondly, there's certainly, you know, the West has influenced protest music in all of these countries. I mean, to give you specific examples, we were in Afghanistan and we met Suzanne Ferouz, who is their first rapper. And she told us that she grew up in Iran listening to American hip-hop music, and that's what influenced her, you know, and inspired her to be a musician. So certainly there's that. But, you know, all of these countries actually have their own traditions. I mean, India is one of our episodes. India has a long-standing tradition of its own protest. You know, like from the Baul musicians of Bengal to the Naxalite, you know, folk singers to, you know, the Ipta, you know, the folk music, protest music. And so each of the countries does have its own music culture, and a lot of it is steeped in protest. But certainly there is, you know, the strand, you know, of Western pop music that's influenced them, and rightly so. I mean, America has a long, rich tradition of protest, you know, from going back to the 19th century. Israel-Palestine is very interesting. You know, music plays we found some very interesting and inspiring narratives from there. Because, you know, the poetry around Israel-Palestine is that it's all going to hell. You know, these are really complex problems that cannot be solved. And I think most of the content coming out of that place is about that. What we found were that there is a segment of the population there that wants to collaborate, and it's led by musicians. So there's a heavy metal band called Orphan Land in Israel that is collaborating with Khalas, a Palestinian heavy metal band. And actually, not only that, they're touring the world together. A very interesting story. Similarly, there's a folk singer called David Broza, who is collaborating with a hip-hop act and many other different types of musicians in Palestine. Again, a very inspiring narrative. So yes, I think that the West has profoundly impacted music in all of these countries, but I think that there is also an organic, sort of authentic culture in all of these countries that's sort of propelling these musicians forward.
You know, by sheer accident, the last 3 days of THiNK have been a sort of America-bashing event, not intended to be that. But Haifa said something which, has been reverberating in me, and she said, we wish that America would export its music and its ideas and its books and its literature rather than the kind of military might that it does export. And so it's great that this particular project is focusing on the more emancipatory exports from America.
Well, I think that we could go one step further and do something even better than that, or even more progressive than that, is also bring music and culture from other countries to America, because I think that creates bridges. And I think that has been one of a focus for me is to bring music from Egypt and from Israel, Palestine, from India, and from Latin America into the U.S., not in an exotic sort of way, but really as if it is a part of the global sort of culture, and that we need to embrace that a little bit more. So I agree with you.
Yeah. So Nariman, I was asking you, what is the place of music in Egypt, traditionally? Has it had kind of acceptance across the board, or has it always been the preserve of a few liberal elites?
Actually, since music has always played a really heavy role in revolutions and protests, back from Gamal Abdel Nasser, there were always those patriotic songs that people still, until this day, listen to and are moved deeply by them, because these songs, they speak to a nation, you know what I mean? And basically what's happening right now is it's basically the same thing, but because this movement is more focused on the youth, or rather the youth are the ones that are fueling this current revolution, so then we have more, it's been more of a raw approach to the music. If you listen to any of it, it's very emotional.
So amongst the new musicians that you've curated, whose work do you like, and are there women in it?
I'm sorry?
I said, are there women in the new music that you've been curating?
Absolutely.
Could you tell us about a couple of them?
There's Dina Al-Wadidi, for example. She has a wonderful voice, and she does some covers from old singers, but she also has her original music that she writes, and it's more philosophical than political, but she also uses satire to expose political issues. So it's very interesting music. And actually, a lot of the bands that are emerging right now use satire in their writing, it's really fun. Because Egyptians have this humor where we're able to just kind of reflect on the positive side, even in the darkest of times, and just laugh it out. So.
Like I asked Karim, can you share some lyrics, just a couple of lines from a popular song in Egypt right now, like a satirical poem, a satirical song? Not off the top of your head.
Yeah, I'm not very.
No, not to sing it, just the words. No, okay, all right. Karim,
I'm not a singer.
I'm going to throw that ball back at you. So you did us a bit of hip-hop that you said was not political, just to give this audience a sense of the political music coming out. Can you do us another one, which is political?
Yeah. Well, one was in English. It was originally written in 2006 when Lebanon was under attack. And the same song resonated and kept on being relevant to all the Arabs until the revolution happened in 2011. And it actually became the anthem to the revolution. Although my lyrics on it was in English, but it still resonated to the people. They really felt it. It said, Destructive destruction, destroying my district. Antichrist is running, is spitting evil wisdom. I'm fighting against the oppressors in Arabic settlements. I'm known for blowing up on beats and governments. My people die in their cribs while you close your eyes and tour. You were kidnapped, you call it terrorist crimes. The media is backing up murderous propaganda while we fight eternally like immortal Highlanders. Al-Durra Sheikh Yasin, the pain's unseen, forging your own story for the blind to see. Wanna draw your own opinion about the bombs we face? What's your opinion if you're slaved and your mom is raped? It's the easy to speak when you're far from the heat. To the White House I creep, and yes, I'm armed to the teeth with a mic and a pen and a pad. Now here's your evidence. Weapons of mass destruction, Mr. President.
We should end on that note, but I'm just going to ask you one last question. So who are your influences? Who are your musical influences across? You know, you mentioned one or two, but
Yeah, there's a lot. Like Abdul Halim was one of my main influences. My mom used to always play his political music when we grew up in Oman, just to keep the background.
Who did you mention?
Abdul Halim Hafiz. He's like the Elvis of Egypt from way back in the 50s and the 60s, from the same era as Kulthum and so on and so on. There's Muhammad Munir also from Egypt. There's Fairuz from Lebanon. There's Bob Marley. There is Led Zeppelin, who I was very lucky to perform with last year. There's Metallica. There's a lot of names. Good music is good music. You know, at the end of the day, you get influence from every good music you listen to. And the song that I performed with them was Kashmir, so it's kind of linked to here.
That's Karim, that's Nariman, and that's Nusrat. Good music is good music. Thank you.
Thank you.